Hey everybody, before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Kobold Press and Deep Magic. Deep Magic is a book of more than 700 new and amazing spells, with spells for every spellcasting class. I'm talking about dozens of new subclasses and 16 divine domains, from beer to speed and beyond. Dark magic for villains, including blood magic, void magic, infernal magic, mythos magic, and so much more. Plus, you'll find twists on familiar magic such as Fireball, Charm Person, and Raise Dead. And there will be dozens of new familiars and arcane servants. So find out more about Deep Magic for 5th edition over at koboldpress.com and tell them DSPN sent you. That's koboldpress.com for Deep Magic 5th edition. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. On the show, I am talking with the one and only Joshua Mendenhall. Joshua is an amazing, he does everything. Let's see, game designer, graphic designer, project leader, an idea person, a hard worker. He does it all. We are going to talk about everything Josh does in this amazing interview with this amazing human. So here it is. Okay, everybody, now I am here with one of the most brilliant minds in tabletop role-playing games. A level 30, challenge rating 30, CR deity among designers. Have I given you enough of an intro, Josh? For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hi there. My name online is HD Paladin, but my legal name is Joshua. And while I'm most famously known as the co-director for the Islands of Sina Una, I just do way too much these days.
You really do. Yeah, we were talking just before this. And not only is your project list big, much of it sounds self-imposed as well.
Yeah, nothing. Few of my things are, hey, we're working on a thing, we'd like to get you involved. A good portion of it has been, hey, I'm going to do a thing. And then me doing that thing. So it's less of a life is happening to me and more like I'm inflicting myself upon life.
Yes. Well, and that's a great way to achieve success as another person who inflicts themselves upon life often. I love that. I love that phrasing of that. Can you, before we get into all of the amazing things that you are doing, can you take me back to when you first laid hands on a tabletop role-playing game? You know, what was your experience? What did you play? Were you the dungeon master? Were you the player? Set it up for me. How did it go down?
So the first time I held a tabletop book was when I was 3.
Wow.
My dad played D&D when it first came out.
Oh, nice.
He was 7 years old when his older brother was playing. And, you know, being an older brother, my uncle didn't want to let his kid brother play, but their mom forced him to let my dad play. So I have the original D&D books. The pamphlets all still in pristine condition, no stains, no marks or anything like that, and a bunch of second edition AD&D stuff. My dad started raising me on stories of D&D when I was 3. I learned about his swordswoman. I learned about his peck, his Svefneblin, and, you know, at 7 years old, then I learned about Cinderella.
You did it the opposite the way I did, right? I didn't learn about role-playing games until I was about 9, but I certainly knew about Cinderella and stuff when I was 3.
Yeah. When I was 10, my dad had a work friend who had a son who was in high school, and 3rd edition D&D came out. And they invited me, and they invited, you know, my dad over to play because they knew my dad played. And my dad was like, hey, do you want to play D&D? And I was walking through the door with my backpack on, and he asked me if I want to play D&D. And I was like, yeah. And I just casually tossed my backpack off to the side and sat on the vehicle waiting. Because I had 7 years of temptation about reading these different books and whatnot. And yeah,
you were like, ready. The day has come. It is time for me to seize my destiny as a paladin. What was the first class you played? Was it Paladin? Just out of curiosity.
It was not Paladin. No, the first character I ever played was a Ranger.
Oh, awesome.
Because at the time I was obsessed with getting in with like having animals and animal husbandry and like surviving out in the wilderness. I was a very weird 10-year-old.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Played that character for a few sessions, and then we started playing 3.5 The Shackled City.
Oh, cool. Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then with that I played a monk for a few years.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So you're playing, it sounds like you've been playing D&D for a long time, and had it in your life even earlier than that. At what point did you, make the leap to dipping your toe into making stuff for money?
To making stuff like this for money, about a year ago now.
Okay. Yeah.
about a year ago and some change, the director of Sina Una, Lucia, we were already talking beforehand. I had done some designs for her dice. If you look at her dice, her name is Seer Sword. All of her numbers are done by me. I started working on that. We started working on a character sheet project, which we still haven't finished because around May of last year, she asked me, "Hey, I'm working on this book. Can you help us out with some design stuff for, graphics and fonts?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I could use the extra money." And then Sina Una has been slowly and increasingly devouring all my time in life. It's been happily given. This project has changed my entire life.
Yeah, it really has, because now you're full time, right? Newly full time in role playing games. So you went from not making any money in this industry to now big bold career change.
Yeah, I don't think what people I don't advertise this a whole lot, but last year in May, I was worried about affording Netflix.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a change.
Very, very much a change. And now I'm working full time on a host of different TTRPG projects and still adding more to my plate because I feel like, this will start happening when I'm done with this project.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I stay right about that, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
But if I'm not, well, we'll see, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and you really do it all. You're a designer. You write stuff. You can do layout. We were talking a little bit about this. You had said like your art skills are not as polished because you haven't worked on things in 5 years. I'll tell you, it's been 34 years since I worked on my art skills. So you've got me beat there for sure. Tell me a little bit about the different things that you do as far as the like your work in tabletop role playing games. What are some of the things people might know you from in addition to the islands of Sina Una?
It's a small list of what I actually have out there right now.
Sure, right? We can't even talk about many things because if you started a year ago, there are things that are still being worked on probably.
Yeah, or I'm still under NDA for, but I worked with Beetle and Grimm's on the Avernus box.
Oh, awesome.
I did the War Machine sheets that you find in the box, as well as some of the basic layout for it.
That's awesome.
For the miscellaneous things. Oh, yeah. It's that project has led to a bunch of other work. I do the character sheets for Swordsfall because I showed him my work with Beetle and Grimm's.
Nice.
I stream now, hoping to do more of it. I currently run social media and I'm the brand ambassador for Dungeon Fog.
Nice.
Yeah. Beyond that, I work pretty heavily with Metal Leaf Games now on a few different projects. And I am currently working with Hit Point Press, or the Deck of Many, on a new project.
Wow.
But of course, NDA life, so I can't shout out to the winds about what I'm doing.
Right. And also, you did the cover for Unbreakable Anthology.
Yes, I did. I did the cover for Unbreakable. I'm a huge fan of Hydro 74. And when I was first getting into graphic design in October 2018, I looked at a bunch of his stuff for how to really think about vector work. So I'm happy I was able to do that one. But because I'm an artist, I am instantly spiteful of it and I want to do better on the next one.
It is cool to hear that because I feel the same way about writing that I do, right? Like I'm like, next one. Now's a chance to redeem myself for the terrible mistakes I made in my last project.
Yeah, I've been working on this campaign setting for about 5 years now, and people think, whoa, 5 years? That must be huge. It must be amazing. And it's like, no, I step away for 2 months, come back and curse a lot because I am instantly disgusted by all that I read from me.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your campaign setting. Tell me about your campaign setting, and then we'll get into Sina Una.
Sure. So I played 3.5 D&D a lot. I pretty much ignored 4th edition D&D, and I was late to 5th edition. By the time I came into it, people were already obsessing over Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So I've been working on this campaign thing, and I made it explicitly to like run a high level 3.5 epic gestalt game because I'm a glutton for punishment. Because that's all that 3.5 is after a certain level.
Yes, really.
And I planned to use all these different homebrew systems, all these revisions to make the game a little bit cleaner. I was going to run this whole big thing because I felt like this will be the last thing I run for 3.5. And then I dropped it up. I dropped the ball, got the ball back up, dropped the ball again, picked it back up. And when I picked it back up at that point, I was already playing 5th edition. And I'm like, this seems like a lot of work to keep doing 3.5 stuff. I'll just do everything over in 5th edition. And so I work on that idly.
So you were like, hey, I've got all these things now that I need to convert from 3.5 to 5th.
Yeah. Which is fine. There isn't much I have to do. It's just a matter of different mechanics I gotta switch up. But it's fine. What matters is the story for it.
Definitely. And that's a big part of campaign settings. Speaking of, right, you have another campaign setting that you're working on that we've mentioned a couple times. Tell me about the Islands of Sina.
Islands of Sina Una is a 5th edition compatible campaign setting based off of pre-colonial Philippine culture and mythology. It's been an undertaking.
Yeah, it really has. So we had Mackenzie de Armas on the show, who is working on this project, and she talked a lot about how even the research for this is extremely difficult because so much history has been destroyed. What sort of inspired this project? How did it get started? And what is your role in all of it?
So the project started when Lucia, sometime last year in April, found out about Bathala, a Philippine deity. And her reaction was, we have deities? Which is indicative of a whole bunch of issues, but it sprung her to start really looking into this kind of thing and think it was really cool. And she thought to herself, oh man, this is really cool. I wonder if anybody's done this for D&D. And Lucy is the kind of person who, when she sees something like that, sees a lack of something, she goes, oh no, am I going to have to make that?
Yes.
She brought in a couple of artists. She got a researcher. In May, she picked me up. And I started off just doing the layout and graphic design work. I went to Gen Con last year with a little printout using my own money, what little money I had, to go around and talk to people and show them what I'm working on, show them my thing. Met a bunch of people who I've been looking up to for literal years, which was wild to me. I got to meet my bosses over at Beetle and Grimm's. I got to meet a bunch of new friends, made friends with people over at Wormwood, and a bunch of people who are associated with Wormwood. And after that, I was talking to Lucy about, hey, maybe we should do some marketing. Maybe we should do like these Twitter threads. I know me or you could do 3 a week. And she said, cool, heads up, you're basically co-director now. And I'm like, well, I earned that, I guess.
You said, hey, I have an idea for these Twitter threads, and that made you co-director, huh?
Basically, because she saw all that I was doing for this book, and she realized that I'm doing a lot more than what my initial job description entailed. So I'm still doing the layout for it. I'm still doing the graphic design for it. Those pages take so long to do sometimes. But I'm happy doing it, and I'm happy that I'm a part of this. We did these Twitter threads for a few months. We did 3 a week. And the first few were so emotionally draining. I for some of them, I would finish it up, I'd hit send, call up Lucia, and in near tears be going, I don't know if I can do this. This is really hard. I didn't. 3 a week? Okay, I guess. So for 3 solid months, I'd never skipped a posting.
Wow.
Always talking about something new with Sina Una.
It is amazing to see what this project has become, right? I remember I first heard about it on probably on Twitter or through the grapevine, and then I went to Gamehole Con, and Gamehole Con was kind of in the middle of your Indiegogo campaign for it.
Like, it was the few days before we started it.
Yeah, and then I met you, and I was like, I'm backing this thing.
Well, thank you.
Because you were so passionate about it, and you were explaining, sort of the different ways that players were going to be able to interact with this setting and the different stories that GMs were going to be able to tell. And I was like, I need that. I need that on my shelf. I need that in the games I am playing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. So it was you definitely by pounding the pavement, you made at least one sale there, and seems like many more based on how well that campaign went.
Yeah, Twitter threads, and going to different conventions and different meetups and whatnot is how we got our funding. Because Lucia, she's got a sizable Twitter following. She's got a K instead of a 5-digit number,
Right. Yeah, that's big. That's big.
Yeah, it's big. And between her and going to conventions and talking to people, that's how we got all of our marketing done. And then because Kickstarter was being very, very iffy with their unions, we didn't want to go on Kickstarter, so we put ourselves in Indiegogo. And we've made a rule between ourselves of we don't talk about how much money we could have made if we had gone on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I have seen several great projects and backed several great projects on Indiegogo, but I agree, right? There is something about Kickstarter. It's got the name recognition that makes it hard to get away from. So there's another platform called Game on Tabletop.
Yes, I have only really seen one major success on there, but it was Pathfinder's. What was the adventure module called? Kingmaker. Kingmaker is the name of it. They made the adaptation for 2nd edition and 5th edition, but it's like it's Paizo backing it, so it's like
right. Yeah, that's
not really playing fair.
I would love to see more big publishers go to places like that to give Kickstarter a run for their money, and then smaller creators might feel comfortable coming to places there. Although part of me also says, Paizo, what are you doing crowdfunding?
Yeah, it was weird, right? It was weird.
Yeah, for sure. It is it's a strange thing, but it's also Paizo itself is a weird company because they're sort of born as a response to 4th edition D&D and Wizards of the Coast kind of cutting ties with them, making the magazines, right? Like, so there's this, it's a weird company, and Pathfinder is a weird game to begin with. Like the idea of Pathfinder now having a 2nd edition, right? When Pathfinder is kind of the 3rd edition of a different game, or the 4th, depending on how you look at it.
3E, 3.5, then Pathfinder. It feels like a weird bastard child.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Watching Paizo grow and what they come out with next is always interesting and exciting for me, because I do think there's some great ways they're pushing the envelope with respect to game design. Hey everybody, wanted to take a quick break to let you know about Burn Bright. Burn Bright is an original science fantasy RPG that I led the design and development of, along with Jim McClure, Kat Cool, and Darcy Ross. It is an original tabletop RPG built from the ground up for Roll20, and you can check it out right now at Burnbright, BRYTE.com. Burn Bright is an amazing game where you take on the roles of these alien characters who have these amazing superpowers, and you are trying to find hope in the most hopeless of situations, the end of existence. It is a very fun RPG with super flexible mechanics that allow you to tell a lot of fun, high action stories. So go check it out over at your favorite website, burnbright.com, BRYTE. Thank you so much to those of you who have already checked it out. Let's get back to the babble. I really would also love to talk with you about a cool little project that it sounds like is actually a massive project you're working on, where you want to help other people who are making books, right? Who are making their first RPG book. And so talk to me a little bit about this project, because I think it's really cool. And we have a lot of people who are designers or burgeoning designers who are listening to this.
So the work in progress title, which I definitely have to change because it feels too rude, but the working title is, are you sure?
I actually think that's great.
I know, but it feels a little too assertive, you know? But it's a book of interviews that I'm doing with a bunch of other TTRPG developers, people who have made massive books, massive campaign settings that sprawl different generations, or people who have put things in the DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG, things that took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and put people through a lot of stress to make. I'm going to be talking with them about what that was like, talking with them about themselves, their life story. I'm very much a fan of My Dinner with Andre, and I'm very much a fan of how Prince did his interviews where you weren't allowed to record things, you could only write down what you remember, so you could only write down what you thought was really cool. And I'm a fan of a guy named Chuck Klosterman, who does a bunch of these interviews, mostly sports and music. And I want to try and capture what it is for someone to talk about themselves in a very honest and open way to really help put forward that these projects are stressful. They take a lot out of you on a daily basis, but you can be fine with that. You can get over that. And you can recover from that. I have cried because of this project, because of the amount of stress that I get under sometimes. Almost weekly now, I get a lot of inflammatory anti-LGBT, anti-gay rhetoric. Making these books is hard, and there's no two ways about that. And I think if you go in more forewarned, more prepared about what could happen, you'll have a better time making it. I've told my writers time and time again that I'm not going to stress because we're in the middle of a pandemic. We've had a lot of issues going along. A bunch of our people are in the Philippines, and they've got their own host of issues going along on top of everything else that we're dealing with here in America. And I'm very much a thing of, if you write while you're in a lowly place, you run the risk of making some lowly work. So I've had to tell them time and time again, take your time. Just when you're okay to work again, we'll be here. And that's been a kind of delay for us, which we don't mind, honestly. Our backers have been very supportive of the fact that we're taking some extra time so our writers aren't writing when they're stressed the hell out about living or breathing. But in a similar vein, if someone goes into this and they get so stressed out that they start making their product shoddily, or they make their project poorly, or they put people through the ringer just to work for them, they're not going to make anything that actually adds to the value of the games that we play, whether it's D&D or something else. There's a company, Frey Lagan, they make this book called Sumbarum. It's this massive RPG, and they put out a new Kickstarter every single time they release a new part of their 7-book adventure. And each, like, you know how we have Storm King's Thunder, it's like one solid book, and that's the adventure. It takes you from 1 to like 13 or 15.
Right.
Sumbarum has adventure books that size, but each one is one of 7 parts.
Right. Wow.
They are taking their time. They are doing what they can to make sure that they have the time to make this properly. And as a result, they have one of the most beautiful RPG books out there. And I want people to get into the notion of, you can take your time. You just have to understand that you're going to be stressed out. You're going to get stressed out. There's going to be a lot of problems that you may not be able to tell. You can find all kinds of books and YouTube tutorials about how to do better mechanical design, how to do better game design, how to do better narrative design, and how to do better art or layout. But nothing really prepares you for some of the hurdles you will have to learn in the process of making these books. A few weeks ago, I had to talk to one of my main researchers, and I had to be very frank with him about, you shouldn't be stressing about this. This is a non-decision. I'm not going to stress about this at all. Please go to the funeral. Don't worry about writing right now. Just go to the funeral. And while someone may not go through this specifically, I think people need to understand that there's going to be a lot of curveballs when you make these things. And I think hearing about these curveballs and hearing from other people what it's like to make these books will help them out. This is essentially the book that I wish I had a year ago when I first got into this.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's always good to make things that you want, right? One of the things that I would also hope, right, is that I think even for people who don't make these books, but for people who buy them, it will probably be an interesting read to see what the process is, because I think we often think a book is a book is a book, right? That like it takes the same effort to write a comic book versus a novel versus a textbook versus a game, and it's not true. And I think as consumers, we look at a book, right, like a TTRPG book, and we say, why is this $50? Why is this $60? Whatever it is. And and when you open up the book and see all of the names of all of the people who have contributed to the book, right? It's like, oh, this is way more akin to a video game, right? That we would drop 50 or $60 on without thinking twice about it, many of us, right? Than it is to the latest novel in the Expanse series, which is, what I mean? Like, I love the Expanse, and I probably would be willing to pay more money for it if they asked me, but it's a similar, a lot of pages in all of those books and everything, much fewer dollars because it doesn't take as much labor to create them. There's not art on every page. Somebody doesn't have to figure out how to make that artwork on the page. Somebody hasn't coordinated an army of playtesters to then have everything rewritten. And once you got feedback from those playtesters, right? Like, there's all kinds of things that happen that do not happen when you are, writing a fictional work like a novel usually.
Yeah, because when you write like a fictional novel, you have the writer, the editor, the person who does the layout, and the publisher. That's it. That's all you got to worry about. And I'm looking right now at a shelf of TTRPG books and looking at how much work goes into making my one book. I can only imagine the logistical nightmares for some of these other books. Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also an industry where because of the nicheness of it, and it's certainly on the rise, and I think consumers are becoming more aware of all the things we're talking about, right? But a lot of people are doing this in addition to another gig, right? People like you and I who do get to be in this industry full time are few and far between. And so you also have to keep in mind, right, the stresses that go along with someone who sits down and says, I want to write a book, and they're also a parent, and they also have a full-time job, and they, maybe have other family and life stresses to deal with and things like that. So I do think it's a really remarkable thing that you are putting together. And I do love the title of Are You Sure?
I got to do something else. It's going to put people off. It really is. And there's a book that I'm taking some inspiration from called Board Game Design Advice, and it's to the point,
Mm-hmm.
But like when I think about other titles so far for this book, it's like How to TTRPG, How to Game Well, Make Book Good. And it's like I got to figure out something.
All right, I'm changing my vote to How to Book Good. I think is my new. That's How to Book Good. : Are you sure? Well, I think it's wonderful that you're putting that together. As we're talking here, what do you like in a game, Josh? Like what are some of your favorite role playing games to play, or settings, or products? Whatever it may be. What do you look for when you, as a consumer, go to check out a game?
One thing I look for almost immediately is how people have done their deities.
Mm-hmm.
We get a lot of the time in base deity of just, here's the deity, here's what they represent. It is a static thing. You have your typical god of war, your god of nature, your god who hates nature, your god who hates war, your god who likes life, your god who hates life. A bunch of antitheses to standard things, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
More or less copying off of Greco-Roman pantheons.
Nice.
So a lot of the time I look immediately towards what you do for your gods. I was raised in a very religious household, and I have been exposed to a lot of religious teachings, both from my parents and from other people. And the way that people interpret faith is so wild and varied sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I always look for is how well can you portray the different ways you can portray a faith. one of my favorites is Eberron,
Right.
because they have this very much big thing of you're not really sure if they're there. There's that one child in Thrain who is for some reason level 20 right now, but for everybody else, they kind of have to go off faith.
Right.
It's interpretive and can have different meanings. In the Greyhawk campaign setting, there's a deity called Palor. It's Palor who is all about healing, devoted to light, and people accept him as a god of healing. And then some people on the internet started putting together some pieces about the cleric of Palor in some of the art books. And all of his portrayals, he is cruel, he is malicious, he is unkind, he destroys undead, but it's more along the lines of they're just another target for him. So people made this fan interpretation of Palor called Palor the Burning Hate.
Oh.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I love how people in the same game world can have different interpretations of the same deity. And I look for that. Can a deity in your world be interpreted in one of two ways or one of three ways?
Right.
Is it a static idea, or are they just there and they ascribe a meaning to it?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I look for that. I look for not necessarily accuracy, but just interesting things. I read this article years and years and years ago talking about how you could be talking about the most interesting thing in the world, but if you tell it in a way that's very boring and dry, no one is going to really grasp at it. And then he goes on for about 2 paragraphs about how he and his son and his family started wearing these little tiger tails, and then one day the son didn't wear them anymore, and they never talked about it again. Right. And he wrote it in an interesting way. So I am looking for ways that authors of these settings write things interestingly, in ways that'll actually grab my attention. Because you can say, it is a castle covered in moss, or you could say this overgrown castle has moss growing over its parapets. Its tower is long forgotten. That's more interesting. I'm looking for that version of storytelling with people's settings.
Right. That's very cool. I like that a lot. And I like to see that people are looking for ways to present information beyond sort of the typical rulebook style, which I do think as game designers, if we don't watch it, we can get too much into textbook mode, right? Like, hey, we're getting the information down and that's what's important. And it's like, well, yeah, but you need to make a book that's fun to read too, right?
Yes. Oh my God, yeah. Writing this campaign setting has been this weird mix between world building and history book. Like we found out a few months back that there are, in fact, some stone castle structures, stone barracks in the Philippines. And we could just say, yeah, we found some stone buildings. Or we could say, yeah, we have some stone buildings. They're on the northernmost part of the Philippines watching Taiwan.
Right. Wow.
Which is so strange and so weird. And I love it. And I've had a drill in about, not drill in, because that sounds very drill sergeant-y of me, but just stressing to my team of just, we are in this weird position and it's going to be a hard line to stay on. And thankfully, they've all been able to walk that line very well, which I'm really thankful for.
That's great. And it's another reason why it's great to have a big team, because you have people to help you walk that line.
Yes.
That's very, very cool. So Josh, for people who want to know more about you, who want to follow what you're doing, where should they go and what should they do?
Well, if you want to find out what I'm doing, you can find me on Twitter under HTT Paladin. That is HTT Paladin, not HTTP Paladin.
Yes. I love that. I think I just got that it's like a URL right now. As you said it out loud to me, because I've never said the name out loud. I've only ever read it. And now I'm like, I get it. Because you're a paladin on the web.
Yeah. That's the dumb joke. I made that username in September of 2018 as just a, haha, I made a fun pun because I like D&D. And now it's like internal pressure to be a better human being. The joke's on me, really.
That's true. Yeah. You don't want anybody ever throwing back in your face like, paladin,
Oh my God, yeah.
The good news is now in 5th edition, paladins can be any alignment, buddy. So you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, but I ain't no Oathbreaker. I ain't no Blackguard.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, if you follow Josh, you get the benefits of his aura of protection and his aura of devotion, and also look at all of the cool stuff that he is working on. So it's a win for you to go follow this individual. Amazing.
As a disclaimer, it's like 30% me threatening Magellan.
I mean, that sounds great. I don't have nearly enough followers threatening Magellan. So
yeah, if you look at hashtag Sina Una, for a while you just see me posting percentages with just another threat against Ferdinand Magellan.
That's great. I love that. The thing that is so cool about that product is that it makes me wonder, like, wow, what were other places like before colonialism, right? Before people came in and sort of took over. What you're working on is cool because it's going to be great for gamers everywhere to play. And it's also kind of a way of preserving some history as well. And bringing together history that it sounds like you're finding in all, different areas, right? That probably should be collected somehow. And so it's cool to see that too. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble, Josh.
Thank you for having me, James.
What a great interview with Joshua. People, if you want Tabletop Babble to get off on a good start when it goes over to the Geekspective Network after episode 200, head on over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. That way, Amber and Kenny and John will get a great start and have a show filled with amazing reviews. It would be a great parting gift to me since episode 200 will also be my last as this show's host. So go over to iTunes, leave a 5-star review, help a lot of other people find this show before it levels up and becomes totally super awesome. All right, people, you can find me on Twitter at James Intricasso, and you can check out all the game design stuff I'm doing over at worldbuilderblog.com. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. This episode was edited by Nate Paulzenga. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Remember, go leave a 5-star review for Tabletop Babble.
Gather round, travelers, to hear our tale. What can I say about the Venture Maidens? As much as I want to just go on and on gushing about my favorite podcast, I'll try and keep it short. The players are absolutely fantastic. I think my favorite thing about the Maidens is the way they collaborate with their fan base. They've created a community for us that they're also a part of.
If you enjoy having your heartstrings pulled out of your chest whilst floundering for air and weeping silently to yourself because Celeste's descriptions of literally anything will make you wish you, too, were about to embark on an epic adventure with 3 killer ladies. Really killer. They're killed alive.
This story is epic. I have cried tears, and I am not kidding. I have so many favorite moments. Kara's hangover routine, Saya's workouts, Arnadel's awkward flirting. I just love you guys so much.
There's a lot of Dungeons & Dragons actual play podcasts out there, so why should you care about the Venture Maidens? Well, if you like games that don't shy away from heartbreak and romance, this is the podcast for you. If you're looking for a podcast where character development is just as important as slaying monsters, this is the podcast for you. And lastly, there's an episode where everyone does their best Godzilla impressions. You gotta hear it.
Join the Venture Maidens on Twitch, YouTube, or wherever podcasts are free. And don't forget to venture away.